It's been half a year since I settled into my new life in Redwood Valley, and not once have I heard from my parents. No missed calls, no emails, not even a casual message asking where I'd gone. They didn't wonder why my lease was up, why my mailbox was suddenly closed, or why the birthday card they supposedly sent never found me. Though, let's be real, they probably forgot my birthday anyway. I still think about that final morning in Marlow Heights. The heat was strange for early April. Too dry, too bright. Sweat rolled down my spine as I sealed the last few boxes. Theo let out a soft grunt as he lifted a crate full of dishes, and Mira used her knee to flatten the lid of my travel bag. The place had been stripped down to its bones, piles of taped boxes, the old thrift store armchair I didn't bother selling. "You're really not going to say anything to them?" Mira asked, wiping her brow with her hoodie sleeve. "Not even a message?" I glanced up from the box I was labeling. Bedroom. Giveaway. "They haven't asked where I live in over 3 years," I said. "Why would I tell them I'm moving?" She didn't push, just gave Theo a glance and he muttered, "Still blows my mind." But it didn't blow mine. It made sense. It always had. I'd been the blurred figure in their family snapshots. Present, but easily cropped out. Useful when needed, quiet otherwise. Drew was their gravity, their golden center. I was the extra. The moving truck groaned under the last load. I closed the rear door, hands pressed flat against the metal until I felt the latch click. I paused, looking back at the apartment I'd lived in for nearly 10 years. It never felt like a place full of memories, only silence. "Good to go?" Theo asked, twirling the truck keys around his finger. I nodded. More than ready. The drive up to Elmsworth took hours and stayed mostly silent. I watched the scenery change from crumbling pavement and gray buildings to towering pines and open stretches of sky. Somewhere between the California border and the first Oregon hills, something inside me began to loosen, just a little. The new apartment wasn't anything fancy. A modest one-bedroom with a dated stove, a tiny kitchen, and a narrow balcony that overlooked the trees. But it was mine, in a way nothing else had ever been. I framed my own pictures for the walls, arranged my workspace exactly how I liked it, made full meals without anyone barging in or brushing past me mid-sentence. I woke up early, signed into work on time, and kept the little basil and thyme pots by the window alive. Theo and Mira came by every couple of weeks. My grandmother Claire called like clockwork every Thursday. No one else reached out. And oddly, that part made me laugh sometimes. Not with bitterness, just the quiet kind that barely makes a sound in an empty room. I had disappeared, and the world didn't flinch. Not until last week. My phone lit up, and for a moment, I just stared at the name. Marcus Langley. It felt like seeing something from a box you meant to throw away. I let it ring a few times before picking up on the fourth. His voice came through sharp and cold. "You need to be back next weekend." I should have recognized it instantly. That call wasn't about concern or curiosity. It was demand, pure and simple. I was being summoned, and not for anything that involved me. I didn't ask why, just told him I already had plans and ended the call before the usual guilt trip could start. Then I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ridge behind my place, dark green and still, and felt something settle inside me. Not sadness, just familiarity. It had always been like this. I remember being 8, making honor roll again. 3rd time that year. I set the report card neatly on the kitchen table, right where I knew my mom would sit with her morning tea. She glanced at the paper once and said, "Nice job, sweetheart," without even lifting her eyes from the screen. That same week, Drew brought home a C on a geometry test and still got to pick where we ordered takeout from. The year I took first place at the Regional Science Expo, I came home clutching a trophy nearly as tall as I was. My teacher had told me that morning, "You should be proud." And I was. But more than anything, I wanted them to be too. At dinner that night, I carefully placed the trophy on the kitchen counter, right in plain view. My dad looked at it once and said, Let's not turn this into a whole thing. Brooke, your brother's got exams coming up. That was the moment I stopped sharing any awards I brought home. By 17, I'd accepted that college expenses would fall on me. I got into a state university on a scholarship, juggled 2 part-time jobs, and quietly stopped going home during school breaks. It kept things simpler, less emotional cleanup. I finished my degree ahead of schedule, rented a shared place, and took on every contract gig I could find. My portfolio grew quicker than my social circle, but I didn't mind. Work gave me something I could steer. Work didn't overlook me at dinner. Eventually, I landed a position with a cybersecurity company based in Tacoma. Remote setup, good hours, full benefits. I've been with them for nearly 3 years now. My supervisor says I have a way of spotting patterns in code that others miss. There's a comma in my savings balance. I keep fresh groceries in the fridge. And just last week, I got a pre-approval notice from a mortgage lender sitting in my inbox. I'm 29 now, and for the first time, buying a home feels real. It wasn't anything extravagant, just something that was finally mine. So when my father's voice tried to drag me back into those old roles, dressed up as responsibilities, I didn't budge. I let the silence do the talking, long enough for him to understand I wasn't playing along. "You need to come home next weekend." That was his opening line. No greeting, no "how've you been?" Just a flat command, like I was still a teenager asking to go outside. I leaned back in my chair and stared up at the ceiling. "Why?" A pause followed. I could almost hear the irritation in his breath. "Your brother's having an engagement dinner. Ava's parents want to meet everyone. They're old-fashioned." So that was it. Not a check-in, not a moment to reconnect, just another photo opportunity. One more scene to stage, with me filling the daughter role for symmetry. "I'm not coming." Another pause, this one edged with disbelief. "What do you mean you're not coming?" Exactly what I said. I've already made other plans. "Brooke, this is a big moment for your brother. These people are well connected. It won't look good if you're not there." There it was, look good. Not how I was doing, not where I'd been, just how it would reflect on them. "I moved to Oregon 6 months ago," I said, my tone steady. "I'm not flying back across the country for a dinner no one even told me about until a week before." The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt electric, like the air right before thunder breaks. "You moved without saying anything?" "You didn't know where I was before," I said. "Why would this be any different?" His voice dropped, low and tight. "How could you move without telling your family? What's your address?" I nearly laughed. "Do you even remember my last one?" He didn't respond right away, and that pause told me everything I needed to know. "That's not the point," he finally said. "No," I replied. "It's exactly the point. You're not asking because you care. You're asking now because it's inconvenient not to know." "Brooke, this isn't how families are supposed to act." "No," I said calmly, "but it's exactly how ours always has." I ended the call. My hand stayed still. No shaking, no doubt. I just sat there and let the quiet return like it belonged. Then the screen lit up, one missed call, then another, a text from him, one from my mother, then from Drew. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I shut my phone off, made a cup of mint tea, and stepped out onto the balcony, watching the daylight fade behind the trees. By morning, the messages had changed tone. Soft reminders turned to guilt. Then guilt hardened into pressure. By the end of the week, I'd racked up 6 voicemails, 11 texts, and 2 emails titled, "Can we talk?" and "Family should stay together." Eventually, my mother called. Her voice came through tight, like she was forcing warmth into her words without slipping off script. "Honey, this really isn't like you. You've always been so polite. Your brother's depending on you. Ava's parents are very proper. We need to present a united front." United, a word that means nothing when it's only pulled out for company. "I'm not coming," I said plainly. "Brooke, don't be difficult." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm just being honest." She let out a breath, not sad, just strained. It's only one dinner. You don't even have to stay long. Say hello, smile, give a short toast, and then vanish again if that's what you want. You mean like I already have? Another pause. Then she hung up. Drew called next. His voice was softer, more uncertain than the others. Less demand, more confusion. Look, he said, I don't really get what's going on with you and Mom and Dad, but can't you just come for this one thing? For a moment, I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered every year he looked the other way while I was quietly erased. No, I said, not this time. The next afternoon, my father called again. This time, the tone had dropped the performance. If you don't show up to this wedding, he said flatly, you're out of the will. I let the pause stretch, long enough for him to think I might be weighing it. Then I answered, calm and certain. I earn more than all of you put together. I heard the breath catch in his throat like I'd slapped him. You're bluffing. If you'd ever cared enough to ask about my life, I said, you'd know I'm not. He didn't say anything else, just hung up. That was the last time I answered a call from any of them. After that, the messages kept rolling in like waves, first urgent, then pleading, then furious again. I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and pulled up the real estate listing I'd bookmarked earlier that week. It was still available. 3 bedrooms, cedar siding, a patch of land big enough for vegetables and flowers. The next morning, just as the sunrise brushed the trees in pale pink, Grandma Claire called. She never waited to check if it was a good time. She just called, and I always picked up. Hey there, sweetheart, she said, her voice wrapped in that gentle, no-nonsense steadiness of hers. How's the air up there this morning? Cool and still, I said. Just how I like it. We talked a bit about the lavender I'd planted out on the balcony and the deer that occasionally wandered past the back fence. Then she paused, just for a beat. They asked me to call, she said, not apologizing, just stating it plainly. I figured, I said. Let me guess. Try and convince me to come back and play my part? They didn't phrase it that way, she replied. But yes, your mother's pacing, your father's brooding. They're worried because they miss me. She hesitated just a second too long. No, she said, because Ava's parents are watching, and they're starting to ask questions. I let out a quiet laugh. Of course, my worth finally mattered, but only because someone else needed it to fit a picture. I'm not going, Grandma. I didn't think you would, she said. That's why I always answered when she called. She never sugarcoated things, never defended their choices, or pretended like history hadn't happened. She remembered my birthday every year, mailed little cards from weekend trips, asked about my work, and actually listened to the answers. She was the only one who ever looked at me and saw more than what I could provide. I just wanted you to hear it from someone honest, she said, not because I think you owe them anything. Thanks, I said. Are you okay? I am, I told her, and I meant it, really. We stayed on the phone long enough for my tea to go cold. She asked about the house I was considering, whether I planned to repaint the walls or keep them neutral. We talked about chairs and fig trees and cozy corners, things that had nothing to do with guilt or duty. By the time we said goodbye, sunlight was spilling through the windows, and I was already back on the mortgage calculator. The wedding came and went without me. That morning, I hiked a trail just beyond the edge of Glenview Preserve, where early wildflowers were beginning to bloom and tall evergreens shaded the path. The silence out there didn't feel hollow. It felt earned. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder what was happening back east. I breathed in the cool air, let the wind slip past my shoulders, and kept walking. When I returned that evening, there was one missed call from Grandma Claire. I called her back before even kicking off my boots. Hey, sweetheart, she said. Still enjoying that mountain air? Every second. She exhaled slowly. Well, the wedding happened. I waited. It was tense, she said. The kind of tension that wears a smile but makes your neck hurt just from sitting at the table. Sounds about right, I said. She laughed softly. Your parents tried to hold it together, but Mira was visibly restless. Your dad barely spoke the whole night, and Ava's mother? She kept scanning the room like she expected someone to walk in. Me? Yes. And when it finally clicked that you weren't coming, she asked about it. I closed my eyes for a second and let the weight of that settle in. What did they say? They scrambled, Grandma Claire said. At first, they told her you were feeling unwell. Then it became a last-minute work trip. Eventually, they claimed you were speaking at a conference. All of it false. She knew, she said. You could see it on her face. She started pressing harder, asked why you weren't at the engagement dinner, why she hadn't even heard your name until a few weeks ago. Apparently, she had a private talk with your mother after the rehearsal. And? No one knows what exactly was said, but your mother came out pale and quiet, like someone had finally held up a mirror. I nearly smiled. And Drew? He looked distracted the entire evening, kept glancing toward the entrance like he expected you to appear. Couldn't hold a smile for more than a second. And Ava, well, she didn't seem convinced by the perfect family script they were trying to sell. I sat down at the kitchen table and let it settle in. Not in anger, but in that quiet satisfaction that only comes when the truth finally starts to echo louder than the lies. They still think this was about skipping a dinner, I said. I know, she replied, but Ava's parents saw it, Brooke. The imbalance, the silence, the cracks they tried to plaster over. We chatted another 10 minutes after that. Nothing serious, just small things. Once we said goodbye, I opened my laptop and started browsing new house listings. The same one I'd saved earlier, 3-bedroom, cedar siding, garden space, was still there. I bookmarked it again, just in case. A week after the wedding, Grandma Claire called once more. I was in the middle of unpacking a box labeled kitchen, fragile. When her name lit up on my screen, I answered and she got right to it. They're still talking about it, Grandma Claire said. No need to clarify what it meant. Ava's parents? Yes, they've gone straight to Drew now, asking why you were left out, why no one mentioned you until the last second, why you vanished from the picture. And what did he say? He tried to brush it off at first, but I think he's starting to realize it's not just going to fade away. Ava's mother doesn't appreciate being misled. I placed the plates I was holding down and leaned back against the counter. Is the marriage already under strain? There's tension, she said, the kind that doesn't smooth out with a vacation. I didn't feel smug. I wasn't hoping things would unravel for him. I just felt still, like watching the water shift after you've tossed a pebble in. They've started asking around, she went on. Your parents are trying to figure out who might have your new number, your address. They even asked me again. You didn't tell them, right? Of course not, she said. I told them if you wanted to talk, you would. I let out a slow breath. Thank you. They're uneasy, she continued. Not just about you, about what Ava's family might say, how it could reflect on Drew, what doors it might close. They're thinking about optics, not connection. Damage control, I said, not regret. Yes, she replied softly, but I think they're starting to understand that this didn't just pass quietly. The way they treated you, it left traces. I looked around the kitchen. Sunlight filtered across the counters. Fresh dish towels were stacked neatly beside the sink. The small window above the stove looked out over a stand of pine trees. This wasn't just where I stayed, it was home. Mine. They were the ones who walked away, I said. They just didn't notice until someone else did. She didn't answer right away, but I could feel her pride in the silence, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be real. That evening, I finished unpacking the last of the kitchen boxes and lit a candle by the sink. The place already felt like it belonged to me. The envelope showed up that Thursday. Plain, no return address, but the handwriting gave it away instantly. My father's rigid block letters, as if tidy lines could rewrite the past. I stood at the mailbox for a while, holding it. The paper was light, but it felt heavy in my hand. I didn't take it inside. Instead, I walked straight to the fire pit behind the house, struck a match, and let the flame catch the corner. The paper curled inward, darkened, and faded to ash. I didn't need to read it. I already knew how the story went. The next morning, I signed the closing documents. Every line had my name. No cosigner, no clauses, just mine. Theo and Mira had texted that morning asking about flight deals for next month. They wanted to visit, see the house, help me plant the first round of flowers. I'd already carved out a patch in the backyard for thyme and tomatoes. That evening, I enrolled in a graduate course in digital forensics. Not out of necessity, just because I wanted to. I changed my phone number that same week. Only a few people got the new one. Claire, my manager, Theo, and Mira. That was enough. No more unexpected calls, no texts wrapped in guilt pretending to be tradition, no more dinners where I was a name to fill the seating chart. The house was still, not empty, just real. Half a year later, the yard buzzed with voices and the smell of grilled peaches and roasted corn. Theo stood at the barbecue like he was overseeing a lab experiment. Mira carried a pitcher of sangria in one hand and a stack of lopsided cups in the other. The fold-out table was crowded with dishes. Cold noodles, quiche, a questionable casserole someone swore was a passed-down recipe. A neighbor's golden retriever had flopped at my feet, tail gently thudding against the grass. My co-worker's little girl, Maddie, tapped my arm and held out a bracelet she'd knotted from colorful string. "You're my aunt now," she said seriously, "but the fun kind." "I'll take that," I told her, sliding it onto my wrist. Later, as dusk settled over the yard and the sky dimmed to that soft, familiar blue, someone from 2 doors down, a neighbor whose name I hadn't fully learned, asked, "Do you have any family back east?" I didn't pause. Not anymore. There was a quiet moment between us. Then I smiled and motioned toward the folding table, where Theo was doubled over in laughter, wiping lemonade off his shirt, and Mira spun barefoot across the grass to a playlist none of us had curated. "But I have this," I said, and I meant every word. After everyone had gone and the house had returned to its stillness, I cleared the dishes, folded the chairs, and wandered to the edge of the garden, the bracelet still snug on my wrist. Fireflies blinked along the fence line. Behind me, the house glowed in the soft light. It wasn't flawless, and it was something better. It was mine.